Today I'm going to talk about the creation of the racial state. This is not the same thing. It does involve the whole we hate Jews, but like Jews are in the United States like a whole nother problem that has to be dealt separately, so they don't really count with asocials and homosexuals and the disabled. It's a different thing. So I've already done quite a few videos on them, and I'll do more. But yeah, so I'm not gonna be mentioning the Jews in this period. Now I'm gonna go through several categories, and the first one is the physically and mentally ill. Well, why weren't they included in Volksgemeinschaft? There had to be a reason. Well, they were apparently burdens on the community. They were unworthy of life. They were costly for the government, and their unhealthy genes weakened the Aryan race. So, of course, they couldn't have these people weakening the gene pool in Germany. No. They had to have amazing genes, and that's why they didn't include the physically and mentally ill under Volksgemeinschaft, even though they should have, because they needed help. They can't really help it, if that makes sense. Well, there were like a few Nazi policies starting in 1939. This policy of It was a policy of sterilization, because they thought all of these physically and mentally ill can't reproduce. Well, they're not going to pass on their genes, and so they're not going to be a burden anymore. And this policy eventually turned into mass murder. But the reason it turned into mass murder, the trigger for this policy, was a letter by a father about his son. In this letter, the father requested his son be euthanized because he just didn't see the son enjoying life, and it would be better to end his suffering. Of course, Hitler and the Nazis took this to mean, of course, this guy asked us to do it for his child, let's just do it with everyone who is disabled. Because why not? Why shouldn't we? Different methods were used, and then by 1940, carbon monoxide started to be used. Because carbon monoxide is an ideal killing agent if you think about it, because it doesn't smell. It's a silent killer. You can't see it, you can't smell it, and it kills relatively quickly. I mean, not immediately, but yeah, they started using these carbon monoxide chambers, like proper gas chambers, to euthanize, not execute. This is euthanasia. So they didn't kill the disabled, they spared them of their suffering, apparently. And it was quite efficient, and it was, in fact, the predecessor to the mass killings of the Jews in the concentration camps. Well, so from January 1940 to August 1941, over 70,000 were killed in just 6 euthanasia centers. So in a year and a half, a bit more, 70,000 were killed. 70,000 in just 6 centers. And of course, you can clearly see how this would go on to be the mass extermination camps in from 1942 onwards. It was quite efficient, and they would be even more efficient. But it's crazy if they just put this much dedication into killing people. Like, instead of killing disabled and killing British, if that makes sense, because this was mid-war, they probably would have won. This whole program was called the T4 program, and it was stopped on the 24th of August 1941. The reason being because the people found out about all this, and they disagree with it, and they posed quite a bit of opposition, so they just stopped this program. Most notably, von Galen, a famous bishop, he was one of the main opponents to this. And yeah, this program was stopped. But the chambers were kept. So they didn't destroy all these chambers, they just closed them. So later on, from 1942 onwards, they would go on to be used for the extermination of the Jews. There's this castle, I forgot the name, which was originally used for this, and then the whole Jewish problem came, and they just used it for the Jews. They killed, in one day, 900 Jews, and they did the same thing with euthanasia. But of course, these were mercy killings. Those were punishments. Like the Jews were the punishments. These were mercy killings. They were sparing them of their suffering. From 1941 to 1945, there was this program instead of the T4 program called the 14F13 program, in which instead of killing them, they were just sent to concentration camps, hoping they would just die out because they were physically ill and mentally ill. So it's like they're just gonna die out, and 20,000 did. 20,000 did. 1941, this propaganda movie again uses propaganda by Goebbels to impose a belief in society called Ich klag an, probably butchered that, was seen by 18 million people. The plot of this movie was that this man had this wife was really sick, and she was suffering throughout the whole movie. And then by the end, the wife says, "Please, please, please, kill me, please." And he does, and everything's like happy ever after. And it just implanted into the minds of the people that euthanasia was a good thing. It would just be ending their suffering, and that people, maybe they didn't say it, but they would be grateful. And I think it's actually this movie that's considered to be one of the most dangerous propaganda movies of all times, because it really did leave everyone who watched it thinking, holy crap, should I be for euthanasia? Should I? And that's exactly what Goebbels wanted. That was a really good piece of propaganda, in the sense that it was effective, not that it was good propaganda. So by 1944, over 200,000 were killed. Some were mixed in with other groups that were killed, but the group of physically disabled and mentally disabled as a whole, 200,000 were killed. And these policies had a huge impact, obviously, because, you can't just kill 200,000 people and get away with it, right? At least some countries have, but you shouldn't get away with it. In 12 years, and so that's the duration of the Nazi regime, around 350,000 people were sterilized, and this was called the Hitler cut, because it was a cut of the genital area commanded by Hitler, and 100 died in like a few years. 100 that we know of. There's more. Obviously, it's not like everyone who went in except those 100 survived. No. Probably it just weren't reported, which is entirely possible. It's a Nazi regime. What do we expect? Then, like I said, this T4 program was established for the killing of disabled people, and it was generally quite successful. Like 70,000 were killed when the program was run. It was headed by Dr. Karl Brandt, and it was eventually stopped, but when it was working, it was really successful. If you know what I'm saying, you know. Yeah, it was successful in the eyes of the Nazis. These people who assessed if you were disabled or not, would just go around centers or houses and go out to people and say, we're going to do a checkup on you. And this was mid-war. You couldn't post. If you do a post, you were sent to concentration camps, we would probably die. So it was either a quick checkup or death. And that quick checkup could lead to death. But at least there was a chance. Well, they would be assessed, and then if they were to die, they were given a positive sign or positive something, and then they were to live. A negative one, which I don't understand. I thought the positive one would be to live and the negative one would be to die, but hey, I don't make the rules. And this program, T4 program, it was all good and all, but of course, how do people find out? Because it's a Nazi party. Can they just cover things up? Well, not exactly, because I mean, they tried, but for example, these people were given the plus. They were sent to centers to be helped, to be given aid, and they were transported there, and then they would suddenly die of a disease. And the parents or the family would be sent an urn with the ashes, supposedly of the person you loved. However, this one family found hair clips, like bits of like hair clips in the ashes. Like, it was the parents of a young boy who definitely didn't use hair clips, and they were like, I don't remember the color, but there were actual hair clips in the ashes. That was obviously not the boy's urn. And another family was told that their child had died of appendicitis in the official report. The child had had the appendicitis removed many years ago, so not that doesn't add up. And stories like these got the word spread around that my child died, but I found a hair clip, and my kid was a boy. Oh yeah, mine died of appendicitis, but he had his appendicitis removed many years ago. What the hell is going on? And word spread, and yeah, that's how people got a hold of it, and that's how opposition arose, and that's how the whole program was stopped. And like I said, all of these methods, yeah, they were stopped, but they were used as a model for the Holocaust. They saw that these methods were effective, and they thought, hey, let's just use it for the Jews. Like I said, this whole propaganda thing, when God was covered up, it was all, it's mercy killings. We're doing them a favor. They want it. They just can't ask us for it. But they really do want it. And that's how they sold this. And people bought into this lie, and a lot of people died. In 1945, around 250,000. Nothing. Just mercy killings. Because why shouldn't we kill those who can't stand up for themselves? The next group is the asocials. And what is an asocial? Well, in 1938 definition, it was said that they were vagabonds, gypsies, beggars, prostitutes, alcoholics, eccentrics, work shy, lesbians, and juvenile delinquents. Homosexuals is a different category. So lesbians actually fall under the asocials. Before I forget, I forgot to mention that in the physically and mentally disabled, like in all of their policies, the Nazis were hypocrite. I do mention Goebbels quite a bit because he covered this up with propaganda, but Goebbels himself was physically disabled. He had a club foot. I think it was his, if I'm not mistaken, his left foot was 2 inches shorter than his right foot because he contracted polio as a child. I don't know the exact length of his left foot, but he had one shorter than the other, and he just walked around like this. And if he were a normal person, he would have been killed. He just would have been killed. But he was a high-ranking Nazi and got spared. Anyway, asocials. Why were these people excluded from Volksgemeinschaft? Well, they gave offense to the community because they were unwilling to work. Well, no, because you don't give them work. If you gave them work, they would be happy to, but apparently they were unwilling to work, and that's why they weren't deemed worthy of living, I guess. Not living, they weren't executed, but of being free. So, for example, they were in concentration camps. They were given this black triangle. In concentration camps, they identified different types of prisoners by signs. Like Jews were giving a Star of David. Homosexuals were giving, I think, a pink triangle. I think, let me check. Yes, a pink triangle. The asocials were giving a black triangle. Asocials again count gypsies and lesbians. That I'm gonna talk about gypsies in a bit, but yeah. That's how they differentiated them. Anyway, in 1933, this whole thing called Beggars Week happened, September 1933. So just right at the beginning of the Nazi regime, Hitler wasn't even furious by this point. Well, 100,000 tramps and vagrants were taken into custody. 100,000, and this is just 1933. Then, June 1938, this national campaign against the work strike occurred, in which 11,000 asocials were sent to concentration camps like Buchenwald, and some would survive, but most would just starve and overwork. And in the 36 Olympics, they were rounded up and sent to concentration camps because they couldn't have other countries seeing these undisturbing and disgusting people on the streets. So they just rounded them up, arrested them, and sent them away. Now, of course, all these policies, they did have an impact. First of all, they classified these asocials into two groups, into the orderly or the disorderly, into the willing and the unwilling. The willing and the orderly, they were seen fit to work and they were actually eager to get a job. Of course, if a Nazi officer said, "Hey, do you want a job?" you would naturally say yes. If you said no, you're toast. But these orderly people, they were given jobs. Simple as that. Problem solved. If you were disorderly or unwilling, you were sent to concentration camps. Like I said, I'm giving the black triangle. Of course, if you were not working for whatever reason, there was increased pressure on you because the Nazi government would be like, "Hey, hi, yeah, why is unemployment decreasing, but you're still unemployed? It's your problem. We're helping you. You just don't want to." And maybe some people were willing to work, but they were just classified as unwilling. Thousands were sent to concentration camps. Majority died. It's because they weren't given proper work. Just leave them be. Give them a job away from the concentration camps. It would be good, right? Because, less resources, but a larger workforce. I don't see what's wrong with that. And this whole matter with the asocials wasn't seen as a state matter, as a welfare matter. It wasn't something that the state should take care of. It was a police matter. They were criminals. So just because you weren't able to work, because you couldn't find a job, because I didn't have enough money, you were just not deemed willing to work and just sent to your death, essentially. I don't understand it. And it was when the propaganda campaigns with this, they just stressed and exaggerated these examples of asocial behavior. Like they would be criminals, they would be vagabonds, they would be alcoholics. They just exaggerate things because they want the people turning into these people. So, again, propaganda. And the unworthy or the unwilling, upon arrival at the concentration camps, were either sterilized right there and then, or killed directly, just killed. And the hypocrisy being that drunks were considered asocials, drug addicts were considered asocials. Hermann Goering, a very, very, very high-ranking Nazi, was asocial. Because technically he would be classified as asocial because he was addicted to morphine. All the Nazis were addicted to some kind of drug, but Goering had been addicted to morphine ever since 1923. So Yes, had he not been a high-ranking Nazi, he would be toast. Anyway, the next category is the homosexuals. I just want to say that two high-ranking Nazis were homosexual. Ernst Röhm, head of the SA, was gay, and Judith Rüdiger, head of the BDM, was a lesbian. She would be classified as asocial, but it's two high-ranking Nazis. I mean, yeah, Röhm gets killed in 34, but Judith Rüdiger, she survives. She would have been killed had she not been a high-ranking Nazi. Well, why were these people excluded from Volksgemeinschaft? Well, they were deemed degenerate, perverted, and a threat to the racial health of society. Of course, the Nazis were really traditional in their beliefs. They didn't believe that anything other than opposite sex marriage could exist. So same-sex marriage was off the table. Same-sex relationships were off the table. So the things they did, for example, in 1934, they shut down a club called El Dorado, and it was a gay club, and it was quite popular, but they were just shut down. It was like very liberal. I did enjoy the fact that their constitution was very, very liberal and accepting. It was shut down in 34, and the Gestapo started keeping tabs on known homosexuals. And of course, that same year, June 34, Rome was killed. I mean, I don't think Rome was killed because he was homosexual. I think he was killed for other reasons. But definitely the fact that he was gay didn't help. Which I still don't see what the problem is, but... In 1935, this law on homosexuality was passed. Law on homosexuality. Like, an actual law deeming homosexuality to be illegal. Like, how freaking crazy is that? 2,000 men were imprisoned, and once they were released, they were recaptured. So they were just sent to concentration camps and given a pink triangle. Like, what the hell? What the hell? And from 1936 to 1938, the Reich Office for combating homosexuality. There was a government post dedicated to combating homosexuality. I don't get it. They arrested 100,000 men and imprisoned 50,000 of them, and they were beaten in concentration camps just because their sexuality. I don't understand. Like, I genuinely don't. Like, what's the problem here? I generally don't get the problem. If a guy wants to have sex with a guy, they can just do it. If a girl wants to have sex with a girl, they can just do it. I don't see the problem. Like, why did Nazis do it? Like, well, obviously, this policies had quite a large impact. The clubs were shut down, and all these happened. And all these things happened, I just mentioned, with huge numbers, like 50,000 imprisoned, sent to concentration camps, and they also got castrated because they believed that if they can reproduce, they wouldn't spread the homosexual gene. How would they reproduce? It's me. But these were voluntary castrations to cure them. And I mean, a lot of these homosexuals went to concentration camps, and 60% of them died from 35 onwards. It's just... Anyway, the next category is Jehovah's Witnesses. These were, why were these people excluded from Volksgemeinschaft? Well, they had international links. They were, it was suspicious how they weren't totally loyal to the regime. They didn't follow just the Führer principle. They followed religious like groups, religious beliefs. These were religious groups that showed the most hostility towards Nazi ideals. They were really entrenched in their own beliefs. Of course, like I said, it didn't follow the whole Führer principle, the whole Übermensch idea, and they only just followed Jehovah, which, if you don't know, is God, Jehovah, God, same thing. And of course, when forced to take an oath of loyalty to the regime or do the Nazi salute, they just refused. So they kind of posed a threat to the Nazis because it's basically a non-conformity. They didn't do what the Nazis wanted them to. Well, what they did, the Gestapo knew of these meetings of Jehovah's Witnesses, so they had their disguise and went to these meetings, heard what they were saying, and took notes of who was there, like notable Jehovah's Witnesses. In 1935, this Watchtower Society was banned. I'm gonna explain. Watchtower Society is just a worldwide organization for Jehovah's Witnesses, which was banned in Germany during this period. And in 1945, 10,000 witnesses were imprisoned, and of these 10,000, 2,000 were sent to concentration camps. You have to know that there were 30,000 Jehovah's Witnesses in Germany, and they were just one of the few groups that, even after facing prosecution and facing death, they continued fighting for their beliefs. In concentration camps, they were giving a purple triangle, and yeah, they just faced a lot of persecution because of the whole refusing to take an oath, refusing to subscribe to the Übermensch idea. A total of 1,200 died in the camps, just dying there, and then 250 executed. Of those 10,000 I mentioned before in April 45 that were imprisoned, 1,200 died just in the camps, and 250 were executed. And then, last but not least, the Roman Sinti. These were gypsies. Well, why were they excluded from Volksgemeinschaft? Well, there was this legal discrimination act that was passed, and there was legal discrimination with acts that were passed, but also because they had a past of criminal activity, although it's more of a generalization, more of a stereotype. They pose a danger to the Aryan purity. If there were gypsies there, they can be racially pure. So that's a danger they posed. And if you were a half gypsy, so you were total gypsy, you could enter German society and infiltrate it and destroy it from the inside. I don't know. That's why they weren't included in Volksgemeinschaft. And in concentration camps, like I said, they were asocials. So they were giving a black triangle with a Z in the middle, a white Z. Well, the chronology. In 1936, there was a Reich Central Office for the fight against the gypsy nuisance. You know how I said there was a Reich Office for the fight against homosexuality? Well, there was again another Reich Office just for fighting gypsies. I don't understand. Himmler, one of the worst Nazis out there, in December 1938, he passed a decree for the struggle against the gypsy plague. He called the gypsies a gypsy plague, like they were deadlier than something. Anyway, and then from 1941, there was a mass sending of the gypsies to concentration camps. Overall, there were around 220,000 to 500,000 gypsies killed during the war, and by the end of 30,000 left in Germany. Well, 11,000 were gassed, actively gassed. Many died before. but I think in just 41 or something, quite a few were gas. I just think it's horrible how these groups in society, there shouldn't be discrimination against them. And I know it's what everyone says, but like, it's the truth. Why did these groups of people face discrimination? I don't understand. But yeah, that is the start of the creation of the racial state. This does not include Jews, like I said, but it just shows how Nazis just wanted this Aryan race to be created, and that's it. This Aryan superiority, like by killing disabled, killing homosexuals, killing asocials, killing gypsies, killing just killing everyone. Jehovah's Witnesses. They don't harm anyone. They're just normal people. But that's what the Nazis did. So yeah, that is pretty much, and I'm gonna leave it there. So yeah, thank you for watching.